From the first moment, Caleb Rourke felt the weight of her against the tailgate, slumped like a broken wing under a wool blanket that still smelled of the desert wind. He knew whatever bargain had brought her into his life would stain him forever, because a man does not pay for another human being and walk away clean, no matter how righteous the reason feels when the coins leave his hand. The sun was low over the San Piedra flats, washing the land in that pale gold that made everything look forgiven, even blood. But the streaks on her shoulder and thigh told a harder truth, and as he tightened his jaw and steadied his breathing, he told himself he had done what needed doing. That pulling her from the saloon owner's grasp back in Crow's End had been an act of mercy, not possession. Yet the words she had thrown at him in a hoarse, daring whisper still rang in his skull like a gunshot. "You paid for me, now do it." Her name was Eliza May Turner, though she had said it like it didn't belong to her anymore, and he had learned it only after she collapsed, after the shouting stopped and the fiddler's tune died crooked, after the room had turned its back on them both. Now she lay half-conscious, lashes clotted with dust, lips cracked, eyes opening only long enough to remind him she was still there, still breathing, still tethered to whatever fate had dragged her across this scorched stretch of earth to his ranch, a place built on silence and cattle and a long-held belief that a man could outwork his past. Caleb moved with the careful hands of someone more used to animals than people, adjusting the blanket, checking the wound along her shoulder where a bottle had broken, telling himself he was only making sure she didn't bleed out before the doctor could be fetched, telling himself anything except the truth, which was that something in her gaze had reached into him and turned over a stone he had buried years ago when his first wife died of fever, and the house went hollow with her absence. The horses shifted in the corral behind him, leather creaking, flies buzzing, the ranch breathing its slow, indifferent breath, and he wondered if the land itself would judge him for what he had done, for the coins he had slid across the bar to a man whose smile never reached his eyes, for the way he had claimed Eliza with words spoken too fast and too loud, like a man afraid the world would interrupt him if he paused. She stirred, a soft sound escaping her throat, and he flinched as though struck, because that sound was not accusation or gratitude, but something worse, something like expectation, and he felt the weight of it settle on his chest. He remembered the look she gave him when the deal was done. Not pleading, not thankful, just steady, daring him to be exactly what she feared, daring him to prove the world right. And he had hated himself then for wanting to look away. Now as he reached for the canteen and pressed it gently to her lips, he saw the lines of her life written in bruises and scars, a map of survival that had taught her to trade her body for breath, for shelter, for one more sunrise. And he wondered what kind of man he was to step into that economy and pretend he could rewrite it with a single act of rescue. She drank, coughed, whispered his name like a test, and when he answered, the sound of his own voice surprised him with its roughness, as if it too had been scraped raw by the day. He told her she was safe now, that no one would hurt her on his land, that she would have a roof and food and time to heal. And even as he said it, he felt the fragile lie of safety. In a world where men carried guns and women carried consequences, where fate was a thing that happened to you, whether you believed in it or not. The ranch house loomed a short distance away, sun-bleached boards and a porch that creaked with memory, and he knew bringing her inside would change it, would break the long, careful quiet he had cultivated like a field left fallow too long. But leaving her out here was unthinkable. So he lifted her with a grunt, her weight lighter than it should have been, and carried her toward the door, each step a promise he was not sure he could keep. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of coffee grounds and old wood, and he laid her on the bed that had known only his lonely sleep for years, feeling the past stir like a restless ghost. And as he turned away to fetch clean water and bandages, she caught his wrist with surprising strength, her eyes sharp despite the pain, and said again, softer this time, not a challenge, but a truth sharpened by experience. You paid for me, now do it. And in that moment, he understood she wasn't asking for his body or his violence, but for the inevitable, for the world to behave as it always had, for him to claim his due so she could stop hoping for something else. He stood there, caught between the man he had been and the man he might still become, the weight of her grip burning into his skin, and for the first time since he was a boy, staring at a horizon that promised everything, and nothing. Caleb Rourke felt the ground shift beneath him. because whatever choice he made next would bind them together in ways neither of them could undo. And as he looked down at Eliza May Turner, saw the fear she masked with defiance and the stubborn spark that refused to go out, he realized with a cold clarity that fate had already taken its seat at his table, and it was waiting to see if he would serve it or defy it. By dawn, the desert had shed its softness and returned to truth, a pale, unforgiving light slipping through the thin curtains as Caleb Rourke sat in the chair beside the bed and realized he had not slept at all, only traveled back and forth across the long, unlit corridors of his own regret, listening to Eliza May Turner breathe and wondering which of them was more afraid of the morning. She woke slowly, pain dragging her up from darkness, eyes scanning the room as if it might vanish if she trusted it too quickly. And when her gaze settled on him, there was no accusation left in it, only a tired certainty that whatever came next would come hard. Caleb rose, stiff and hollow, and told her the truth without ceremony, because lies had already cost both of them enough. He had paid to get her out, nothing more, and whatever debt she thought she owed ended at the edge of that saloon floor. She laughed in a dry, broken sound that scraped the air, and said men always talked that way until the world reminded them who they were, and he felt the sting of it because he knew she spoke from experience, from nights measured in fear and bargaining, from mornings where survival felt like a punishment. He cleaned her wounds with hands that shook less than his heart, wrapped fresh cloth, fed her broth, and gave her space when she turned her face away. And in those small, ordinary mercies, something unfamiliar began to take root, something fragile and dangerous as hope. Days passed, marked by the slow rhythm of healing and the work that never waited for sorrow, and Eliza watched him from the porch as he mended fence and broke horses and moved through his life like a man trying not to break something already cracked inside him. She learned the shape of the ranch, the quiet corners, the way the wind changed its voice at dusk, and she helped when she could, folding laundry, stirring pots, doing the small things that made a place feel lived in rather than merely survived. At night they spoke little, but the silence between them shifted, no longer heavy with threat, but with the unspoken weight of choice. And Caleb found himself thinking of his first wife, not with the sharp pain of loss, but with a gentler ache, as if she too were watching, waiting to see if he would choose kindness over fear this time. Trouble came as it always did, riding in on dust and old debts, when the saloon owner arrived with 2 men and a smile that curdled the air, demanding his property back and calling the law to witness it. And Eliza stood in the doorway, spine straight despite the tremor in her hands, ready to return to the life she knew because it was safer than believing in a miracle. Caleb stepped between them, voice steady, gun low but present, and spoke not of money but of marriage, of a vow made before God and land and witnesses who might never come, and the word wife fell into the yard like a stone, heavy and irrevocable. It was a lie made true by the willingness to stand behind it, and Eliza felt it then, the shift she had sensed from the start, the moment where a man chose a future over his own safety, and as the saloon owner spat curses and rode away, she realized she was shaking not from fear, but from the sudden, terrifying possibility that she was no longer alone. That night she confronted Caleb beneath the open sky, demanded to know why he would bind himself to her when walking away would have been easier, and he told her about loss and loneliness and the quiet way a man can disappear inside his own life if no one dares to see him. And she told him about being sold piece by piece until she forgot she had ever been whole. They stood there, 2 broken stories leaning into the same wind. And when he asked her, not as an owner or a savior, but as a man who knew the cost of love, if she would stay by choice this time, she answered yes with a voice that trembled but did not break. The years that followed were not gentle, but they were honest, shaped by work and forgiveness and the slow, stubborn building of something that could endure the weight of memory. And the ranch became a place where pain was acknowledged but not worshipped, where survival grew into belonging. And if you are listening to this story now, hearing how one decision in the dust can echo across a lifetime, remember that the Western Tales lives on choices like these, on the moments where fate meets courage. So if this journey moved you, stand with us, ride with us, and subscribe to keep these stories alive. Because out here, stories are how we remember who we are, and sometimes they are how we find our way home.